Before we start, imagine being at the cinema. Hopefully you haven't forgotten what that's like. And that bit comes on that says, put your mobiles away, enjoy the film. Well, you're definitely in for a treat with this training. So please, put the marking pen down and put your marking away and fully focus on the video. On a serious note, please do put phones and stuff away, just like we tell the students they should, so that you can focus on this training. It's part of a sequence of training. Ellie and I are starting them off. I'll be talking about habits and behaviour for learning, and Ellie will be talking about explanations. Then Gemma will be supporting you all with some videos about Rosenshine. Rosenshine misses off behaviour for learning and explanations, which is why Ellie and I are doing them. But they're so important. Relationships are so important. Today is about focusing and reflecting. That's what we want you to do. I need your full attention so that you can be able to do that. It's going to link to lots of other things like observations, work scrutiny, and I really hope that you all get something from it. Apologies in advance about the sound. It might go a bit loud and a bit quiet. It's just because I've had to record it at different times. One of the things Kirsty talked about on the first day back was habits, and conveniently this week it's the focus on Wilf's Weekly. We all want our students to be in good habits. In December, we were given some books by Kirsty, and I got the Atomic Habits book. It really is a great book, and it's really helped me think about my habits. It's written about everyday life though, not habits in the classroom. What we want to do today is think about our habits in the classroom, and particularly our habits regarding our interactions with the students. Habits are really valuable because they have a huge effect over time. What we do most days, most lessons, when it's just us and nobody else. These are the things that we can work on, and they are so important because they're the things that are going to have the biggest impact on student learning, because we do them so often. We're not interested in putting on a show, doing things because you think someone else wants to see them. We want you to think about those little things that you do day in, day out. Think about that ripple effect. What are the small things, the detail that we can tweak that actually have a huge impact? There's an important point to notice here. Now, by the way, we all know Kirsty likes a good analogy. We all know I like food. Try to combine the two. So I've come up with teachers are like donuts. We're all the same, but we're all different. And an important point to notice is we are all different. We're not going to do the same things in the same classroom have the same effect. And that's not what we're trying to do at all. We're not trying to get everyone to be the same. We are trying to get you all to be reflective and think carefully about those habits. The main difference between us is that we're all at different stages in our experience of teaching. And a lot of the classes we teach have different dynamics. We have different personalities. What works in one lesson with one student may not work in another. Different things in those different classes with different staff might work. What's key is our ability to reflect. Some people find it quite easy to be self-reflective. They can articulate to someone what they think they do in the classroom that is effective and what they think they could work on to improve. Others, though, they can't always see which bits of what they do are having the impact on what we see with the students, which bits are effective in getting the best out of the students and helping them learn, and which bits might actually not be helping students learn, think, or make progress. Today might be difficult for some of us, as we're not naturally reflective, but we've tried to give an opportunity to everyone to be as reflective as possible so that we can all continually improve, because that's what teaching is all about. The other thing that's really important as we reflect is that we're aware that we'll all have blind spots in the classroom, just like we've got a blind spot in our car. We'll all do things that we don't realise we do and that have an impact on students. Some might be good impact, some might not be so much. And an element of this is trying to find those things or using things like lesson observations or student voice to help us identify and see those things. One of the things you'll all remember Kirsty talking about is schema. This idea that you have to build on knowledge that's already there, that things stick better if we're building on knowledge that's already there. Since we came back in September, we've looked at a variety of different things. The first thing Kirsty talked about on the first day back was habits and thinking about how changing a small habit can have a big effect. We've also had a whole school focus on habits of presentation, making sure the students have got their rulers and the presentation of their work is the standard we expect. Gwen made us a video about some of the challenges that our PP students face. Before half term, JP asked us to have a renewed focus on homework, getting into different habits like the way we write it on Firefly, just to help the students, give them the right cues to know exactly what they need to do. And more recently, a few of us have had some CPD about how to get the best out of boys. The last 18 months have been hugely disrupted for us and students. The mental health of everyone is a real issue at the moment. So today, as we combine these things and ask you to reflect on your habits, we want you to focus on relationships, communication and interaction with students. Some really small changes in these things can have a huge impact on people over time. Okay, so I'm going to talk about habits. And one phrase that was in the book that stood out to me was that a habit is a mechanism to get the thing you want. You don't want the habit, you want the outcome the habit delivers. I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it. And this idea that habits, they don't just happen on their own. When I was an NQT, I can remember having a year 8 class and really struggling with them. And I remember someone suggesting that I go and watch a more experienced teacher. I watched the more experienced teacher and I can remember thinking, if I asked that student to do that, they just wouldn't be the same. They wouldn't be as quiet. They wouldn't be as calm. And I can just remember thinking, I can't do what that teacher is doing. But now I look back and I know that she had instilled certain habits into those students in that classroom that meant they did have the right environment, the right cues and things to do. And one thing I just want you to remember within all of this is that experience kind of does matter and it does make a difference. The longer we teach for, the more that some of our habits become automatic. But at any level, we can all improve. The pandemic may have encouraged us to develop some bad habits, or you may have developed new, really effective ones. We can all reflect on the positive and maybe things we can improve regarding habits in the classroom. At any level, we can all improve and make a difference. This is the book some of us have got, and I really would recommend reading it. It's really good. But it is easy to apply to your own life, more difficult to apply to the classroom. That's what I'm going to try and help you do today. I'm really trying not to go through some of it, so I'm going to go through it quite fast. Please read the book if you want a bit more information or you don't quite get why a particular thing is important. The main premise of the book is that to develop a good habit, make it obvious, easy, attractive and satisfying. For instance, supermarkets position the thing you want to buy in the aisles so that it's obvious. In the classroom, that's your, well done Tyler for having your book out ready. You're making it obvious to the rest of the class what you want them to do. Do you use that positively phrased language? Do you make it easy? Are your instructions clear, concise, and you give them time to follow each one? I know that sounds really basic, but in the rush of moving rooms and some of the logistical challenges we've faced recently, just coming from a break duty, something like that, do you rush in and give 5 instructions at once? Sit down, books out. Corey, look this way. Do this questionnaire. Ryan, why's your iPad out? Are you shouting lots of different instructions to lots of different people and somewhere, say in the general one, get your book out, well, it's going to get missed? Really carefully think about how those instructions are given. Making things attractive. Be careful with this one, because for some students, merits can make something attractive, but that's not really what we want students to develop motivation for. We want students to find it attractive through wanting to create a good piece of work rather than a reward as such. Do you highlight excellent work often? Show photos of neat presentation? I do think it's a difficult one, but for some students, the positive verbal feedback that they know regularly happens in a classroom makes completing quality work much more attractive. Making it satisfying is quite similar. It's satisfying for a student to hear that they've acted on feedback, corrected themselves, little things like that. How do you make what you want students to do appealing, attractive, satisfying, obvious and easy? Because if we can make the things we want students to do, if we can make them those things, they're much more likely to do them. Equally, we want to remove the bad habits, Things like making sure they don't glance at their iPad while you're talking. Well, a simple thing, you make them keep their iPads in the bag, or you turn them face down when you're talking. Making something difficult. So this is perhaps them talking to the friend. Well, that's the way we all manage our seating plans, or keep the people that we need facing the front at the front, the person who always turns around, put them at the back. Making something unattractive. Your detention can come in there, but just be careful that you're not being negative too much on something. And making it unsatisfying. The idea with that one might be that you're not focusing your attention on the person who isn't working, but you're giving lots of positive praise to the person who is. And the minute that person who wasn't working does something right, that's when they get the praise. So it's unsatisfying to not work because they're not getting any attention or feedback from it. This is what we've got to do to remove the bad habits. Make it these things. I found the part of the book about cues really interesting and eye-opening. It gave me that light bulb moment of, oh, that's why I do that all the time. Think about cues in two ways. What cues do certain students give you that might change your demeanour or tone without you realising it? Jay can walk in my room in quite an animated way that I know will make my demeanour slightly more negative compared to the student that walks in the room, says good morning or greets me, sits down, gets the book out, might have quite a nice conversation. I know that will change my demeanour. So I have to be really conscious that I treat Jay or anyone that walks in perhaps not completely ready to learn in as nice a way as I would the other one, but perhaps just re-emphasising some of the expectations or asking them to try walking in again. I don't want to be negative with him though. I don't want him to give me a cue that makes me change my behaviour. The other way you can think about it is, what cues do you give the students as they walk in the room? So could I be stood there waiting at the door with my arms folded and he walks towards me, seeing a bit of a negative body language going on? Or am I stood in a different place and just a bit more welcoming? And before he can either do anything, can I get a good morning, great to see you, are we feeling ready to learn, or something equally as welcoming? Sometimes we just get into bad habits and it can be really difficult. We have to be very conscious that we're saying the right thing to get the best out of our students by giving them the cues to make the right choices. This one again is really interesting. They talked about how there were some soldiers, I think it was in America at some point, and there was a drug problem when the soldiers were out at war. And they all got addicted to drugs because it was pretty much all they could do on their downtime. And so there was this huge problem that all these soldiers were drug addicts. But when they came back to America and back to their normal lives, the problem just stopped. And it was all to do with their environment. When they were at war, they had easy access to the drugs. They were satisfying because it's the only real pleasure they had. It was attractive to them because of that. And it was obvious where to get them from. So it had all those good things. But as soon as they returned to the normal environment, the drugs were hidden. They couldn't get them. It was unattractive because everybody around them wasn't doing it. And it was unsatisfying because they had all the other positive things going on. And it was amazing. And this it makes sense because this is why when you go to rehab, people stop doing things. But then as soon as they're back in their normal environment where those drugs are easy to get hold of and things like that again, it's really hard for them not to slip back into their old habits. So a very powerful one. Is the environment in the classroom right to get the students to do the right things? Now, I just want to give you an example of a really small habit that I've realised I'd started doing that actually makes quite a big impact. When the students are walking into my room, this is a Year 9 group, I stand position in that corner. And I do it very deliberately because Mohammed is in front of me and Mohammed needs me to constantly stay on top of making sure he's doing what he's been asked. By standing in front of him, I'm not actually keeping on top of him. I'm constantly saying, well done, you've written the date. really small things, because he really does well with that praise. And Mohammed in my class, he's come such a long way with the help of his form tutor. He's working really well, but I have to keep on top of him. But also, you can see there's some other students in there, and I can see all of them. And I remember this point, I turn, and that's Corey at the front doing something, and I turn and remind him about getting his pen to his paper to do that work on the board. You can see most of the rest of them are doing it. But that positioning in the classroom is absolutely key for me to be able to keep on top of Mohammed and get everybody else working at the same time, and just visually keeping an eye on them all and being able to say those positive things to those students and just get those that aren't making the right choices back on track. And it's just, it seems so simple, but I never actually thought about having him there. I would have had him in the middle, but that means I can't quite keep I get in the way of the board. So it really, really works well. And it's just an example of something that I've found in my class. Very small thing, just my position as they walk in the room, or when I'm explaining, that's where I try and stand, because over time it means more of them are listening and it has quite a big impact. The other thing it allows me to do is just drop little bits of praise on Mohammed that nobody else can hear, because he needs quite a lot. I don't want to make it patronising or anything, so I can just drop little quiet ones in, and it works really well. I also want to remind you about the PP PowerPoint that Gwen released, because that's one of the ways I learned about how well Mohammed responds to praise. So it is worth, when you're thinking about how you speak to or treat certain students, that PowerPoint will really help you know how to perhaps target some of your attention to some of our more disadvantaged students to help them make the choices and get the best out of them. Now what I'd like you to do is use your sheet of paper. There's a bit of a summary of what I've talked about on one side, and on the other side you're going to fill some things in. And today we're going to do this on our own to start with. So in that first section in particular, I want you to think about positive and negative language, how you are greeting students, what routines are embedded. Do they all know they should have the book out and the pen out? Because some classrooms are walking and they have all got that out while they're waiting for the teacher. Other classrooms are walking and they haven't got the books out, and I try and encourage them to be ready to learn. And it's just about getting those habits and making it obvious to the students, I expect you to have those books out with your pen and be ready. How are you prepared for the entrance of the students at different points in the day? I know some parts of the day are harder than others, if we've just come from form, if we have to move rooms, if we've just come from a duty. So do you prepare for those different scenarios in a different way? I have one lesson where I'm duty in the morning, and I know the students are going to be in there before me. They know that they get a merit if they're on TT Rockstars, because the first thing I do when I walk in, I don't walk in and set my stuff up. I walk in and go just do a zigzag round the room, and anyone who I see on TT Rockstars gets a merit, just to encourage them to get into that habit of getting on with something while they're waiting for me. Little things like that you could encourage your students to do for your subject. I've said this already about instructions, but I think it's really, really clear. One thing I've read, and this is ages ago, boys like much less language than girls. So whereas with a girl, you might be able to say, would you mind getting your book out for me, please? With a boy, you want to reduce your number of words. Please, could you get your book out? Please, can your book be out? Think of the minimal amount of words you can say in the nicest possible way, but the boy just wants to hear get your book out, but in a nice way. They respond to conciseness. And be careful with communication, verbal and non-verbal. Are your arms crossed? Are your hands in your pocket? Because if you're teaching with your hands in your pocket, it's not a particularly open posture, welcoming posture. Different points of the day, if you know you have quite a difficult lesson, you might go into the next one with a slightly more negative non-verbal demeanour. And it's things I said earlier about blind spots, and it is some things like that. I've seen a teacher stand at the board teaching with a hand in the pocket, and it just comes across slightly less enthusiastic. And you won't always see or know that you're doing these things. And this is why I want you to really focus and reflect. And I probably would say with this, think of your most challenging group, because really that's where we can make the biggest gains and the most improvement quite quickly. And if you find them challenging, you are more likely to, without realising it, have a bit more negative non-verbal communication or even verbal communication. That tone, be really, really careful with that tone. There's an article that should appear or has appeared in your email inbox. You shouldn't have noticed it because you shouldn't have your emails on because I asked you to focus. But I think it's a really nice article, very short, but I just thought, oh, that is a fair point when I read it. And it was just quite nice, and it was about the way we speak to people. So it's worth reading that when this whole video is finished. Pause the video now and try and think of your most challenging class and think of how do you do these things? Answer these questions about your most challenging class. So pause the video and press play again when you've filled in this part of the worksheet. I really, really do want you to think about the little things. How do you make sure they're ready for explanations? Wait for that silence. Now, I know this is something we get told as an NQT, but have we, in the rush of moving rooms and everything that's going on, have we started to rush a little bit more? Have we stopped pausing, waiting, making sure everybody's focused? Those iPads are upside down so that they can't see the screen. I'm not going to lie, I was explaining something to a group that wasn't my usual group the other day, and I noticed that a few of them were just starting to switch off a little bit. And it was interesting because without knowing them, without knowing their names, normally what I would do is I would then pick on that child to either give me an answer, support them with it if they weren't quite learning so that it didn't feel negative for them. But I couldn't do this with this group because I didn't know the names, and it just made me think, oh, hang on a minute, what do I need to change? What do I need to start saying differently? And it's just those tiny little things. We can all improve, but we have to be reflective about how do we do these things. I do appreciate the how often do you circulate? That's really difficult at the minute, and that's the one thing where some of these habits we might struggle to do. But if we're conscious that when we are able to, we can do those again more often, make sure that's something you can do when we're able to. And the final one, how do you know all students are working achieving? Someone told me the other day there's two students, different classes, different years, but they told me they'd realised these two students have both managed to get through a lesson, even though they looked like they were writing, nothing on the page. So how are we managing to check that students are working and that students are achieving? Now, you can get into a bit more depth with these two, but is there some sort of easy mechanism that you can create a habit where you are checking that everybody is writing a certain amount of thing, or everybody is up to a certain question? Or do you have good habits with your whiteboards? I get my students to, when they've written on the whiteboard, I tell them to chin the whiteboard, and all that means is they put it next to the chest so that the answer, the rest of the students can't see it. But to me, it signals that they're ready. So I know there's very few people, I can tell when they're all ready to give me their answer. Okay, pause the video now and just try and answer these sections on your worksheet before you move on. Same idea with this one. In the rush of everything, and I'm going to just mainly talk about the bottom one, I'll let you think about the top one, but in the rush of everything, I still try every time to make the students stand behind their chairs in silence before I dismiss them. It just emphasises that I am the one in control of that lesson, and it means I don't forget. That it gives me a second to think, hang on, who do I need to speak to? Which are the reports I need to do? It gives me that little thinking time to do as well. Pause the video and have a look at these ones. Think at the same things as we've been thinking on the last ones as well. What I hope you've got on your sheet now are lots of things that you recognise you already do, the good things you do. What you might have done if you've thought and reflected, what naturally will have happened is you will have thought, actually, I could probably do a bit more of this. I could probably do a bit more of this. Hopefully, as you go back together to your departments, you might talk a little bit about some of the things you find help you have those good habits in the classroom that lead to great behaviour for learning and actual learning. Before you go though, I would like you to write a commitment in the section. I would like you to think about something you're going to commit to change. Now, You might be committing to share something that you think, do you know what, that's really worked and no one's really ever said it. I just did it one day and it worked and now it's a habit I have and I would really like to share it. You might commit to, I can see I'm negative with this group because I find them challenging. So I'm going to commit to, and be specific, say the detail, say exactly what it is you're going to try and do, because the more specific it is, the more likely you are to do it. You're not just going to be nicer to them. You're going to say well done to someone who does something rather than asking someone who doesn't. Make that commitment now. It's really important that you wrote that down, and there's a reason I asked you to do that. In the book it says that if you write down a commitment to do something differently, to try and change a habit, I think the research found that you were 30% more likely to do it. On Friday with my year 8s, they turned to the back of their book, and when I gave them their homework sheet, they wrote down when they were going to do it. That little habit could have a ripple effect in that some of them, because what came out was a conversation about how some of them wait till Sunday night or the night before. So we had a bit of a discussion about that. But for some of them, it will just help them get that organisation a little bit more. And it will help them make sure that they do that homework. It won't work for all of them, but that's an idea of another nice little habit that you could get your students into. Can they just, in the back of the book, write, or if it's on the sheet, write on the sheet, when exactly are they going to do that homework? And that's one of the reasons I've asked you to write that down today. Now, don't forget there is an article that is a nice, short, interesting read that will be in your inbox now that I'd like you to read once you finish this. And then just thank you so much for listening. I hope it's been okay and I haven't waffled too much. And I really hope you've managed to keep your marking and your phone and everything away and found this useful. The reflecting is really difficult for some people, so please do try to reflect honestly, because we're going to ask you to do that in every session that we do. Please now go to your learning coordinator and take direction from them about what you're doing for the rest of the session. Thank you.